The Tuesday MPs are here to talk political phobias divided neatly along party lines. We're talking motion sickness on the Commons floor. Marco Mendicino is a Liberal MP from Toronto. Karen Vecchio, a Conservative MP from Southwestern Ontario. Nikki Ashton, NDP MP from Northern Manitoba, and still undeclared for the NDP leadership race.
He doesn't even ask this week.
I'm not even asking. I already cleared the green.
But you put it out there.
You know, we had this motion voted this afternoon in the House of Commons, the Conservatives' motion on how to combat racism and discrimination against all faiths, a number of them. NDP said that's a good idea. The Greens said it's a good idea. The Bloc said it's a good idea. You guys said it's a good idea. The Liberals said no. Could you explain to me why this motion wasn't worth supporting?
Simple. It was my colleague Yurka Khalid's motion. It was 99% there with the exclusion of one word, Islamophobia. And the reason we couldn't support the motion today, notwithstanding our efforts to approach the opposition in good faith and ask them to amend their motion so that we could incorporate an appropriate discussion at a difficult time, in particular for the Muslim community, especially in the wake of the Quebec City mosque shootings, around religious discrimination. The opposition refused to do that, so we couldn't support the motion, but we will support Yurka Khalid's motion in the not-too-distant future, as I hope all parties will.
Nikki, you didn't have a problem, your party didn't have a problem with the Conservative motion at all. Do you see this as like a little bit of political nonsense?
Yeah, well, I mean, it is an example. I mean, we certainly refuse to play politics with something as important as the politics of hate. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, obviously, it has the motion does explicitly refer to the Muslim community and other faith-based communities. We've made it clear that Islamophobia must be taken on head on, and that we must make it clear that it's unacceptable in any of its forms. But I think, you know, what perhaps we're seeing here is also the Liberals trying to make up for the fact that that initially Prime Minister Trudeau wasn't very clear on denouncing Donald Trump's politics of hate and Islamophobia just a few weeks ago. And so is this making up for that? I don't know. But ultimately, this motion was something that was worth supporting, and we're keen to be supporting the Liberal motion coming up soon as well.
I know we're going to be sitting here in April pointing the same finger at you, though, and saying you're not supporting the Liberal motion because it does confine itself to Islamophobia, but it does reference further into it other racial discriminations and other religions. So I'm just kind of confused. Try and tell the viewers why this was a big deal for the Conservatives to put a contrary motion and not support the Liberal motion.
Well, not that it's contrary, but I think it does add all of those religions in. We do see many religions across this country, so we added about Sikhs, we added Christians, we added them all, because we see that this continues all over the world, all over the country. And whether you're Jewish or anything like that, when hate comes out and intolerance comes out, we do have to defend against it. Another thing with the definition of Islamophobia, that has come up time and time again. So what we added and asked for the MP from the Liberals who put forward this motion, we asked her to change that word to showing that it was against Muslims. And that's what we asked, because that's what we're looking for. She denied that. We came up with something that we thought was much more inclusive. And, you know, I'm hearing from my own constituents and from people all over Canada that we need to deal with all types of hate, not just one specific.
I don't know about you, but what I'm hearing is people think you're playing politics with something that's fairly important, and it's silly. A silly season in the House of Commons.
Not to put a finer point on it, Don, but the original motion, as introduced by my colleague, Ms. Khalid, was inclusive. It did ask the House to condemn all forms of religious discrimination and made a specific reference to Islamophobia because obviously it bears some highlighting. But the House has in the past also condemned religious discrimination towards other communities. For example, Mr. Kotler brought forward a motion in 2015 that condemned anti-Semitism, and now we have this motion. I would also point out, I think interestingly, that Patrick Brown, who's the leader of the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party, is going to be supporting a similar motion, which will be debated in the Ontario legislature. So that is the kind of, I think, unity that we're looking for in the House of Commons, and we are hopeful that we will see that in the House when we vote on Motion 103.
And I appreciate everything you're saying, Marco, because I have great respect for you, but we know that this bill has become more divisive, and we've actually seen a Liberal MP come out and blamed the Conservatives for their policy on creating what happened in the mosque on that horrible day. Let's be real. It's gone way too far, and this idea of unity, it's actually become much more divisive than it needed to be, and instead we have to work now back together to try to mend what's happened out of this motion.
You've seen that. You're not the rookie on this one. You've been around the political world for a while. You must think people are just shaking their heads at this, saying, really? This is what the House of Commons has come down to, a quibble over a few words on a motion that has no legal heft anyway?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you know, and what I think many people in the Muslim community and in communities across the country want to see is also action. And that's one of the things that we're saying is critical. I mean, let's get behind these motions that speak out against the politics of hate that targets the Muslim community, against Islamophobia as well. But let's also do things like repeal the Safe Third Country Agreement, which we know is affecting many refugees, many of whom are of a Muslim faith, that are trying to seek refuge in our country and leave the States. You know, and that's what we're hearing from folks. It's let's agree to this language, let's make a strong statement against hate, and let's get moving to action. And that's what we're looking forward to seeing from the government as well.
We should all stand against discrimination in every form, including religious discrimination, whether it's in the vacuum of silence or whether it's through harmful speech or whether it's through violence like we saw recently in Quebec. And that is why I remain hopeful that the House will unanimously support the motion.
Well, it could have supported this one and that one, and I'm not sure anything would have changed, to be honest with you.
Well, the obvious exclusion, which I think is, you know, we'll let Canadians judge why the opposition refused to tack on that amendment, but we're firmly behind Ms. Khalid's motion, and we look forward to the further debate.
Either, by the way, Marco. So anyway, I think we've decided that we've had enough of this motion for a while. Let's talk about it again in April. All right. I do want to bring up this border crossing thing because there's lines of demarcation on this discussion that are kind of interesting. I mean, the Conservatives, we saw Tony Clement just a few minutes ago saying, you know, we need more resources, and Ralph Goodale didn't say no. But on the other hand, the Conservative or the Liberals are not looking to welcome them with open arms. Or they're looking to welcome them with open arms. So it doesn't really matter how many resources you do, as long as you have a place for these refugees to stay, I guess, is what you're looking at. I mean, what do you think of the Conservative push to say, look, let's stop it? How do you stop it?
Well, you ensure that you have a robust law enforcement apparatus so that you can protect our borders, as Minister Goodale said earlier today in question period. And Canadians should be reassured that the law enforcement and immigration officials have the resources that are necessary to protect our borders, to enforce the laws as they exist. If there is a conversation that needs to be had between our officials and the minister, as he indicated earlier today. He's prepared to have that, but thus far, what we are being told is that they have the resources that are necessary. Look, at the end of the day, we understand that there are going to be a number of illegal entries. I don't know exactly how the current trends relate to past trends, and that's something that I'm sure we'll hear more about. And I do want to take a moment as well to recognize the generosity of Canadians, in particular in the communities in Manitoba and in Quebec, because we do need to be compassionate towards both refugees and others who are seeking asylum.
Karen, I'm just curious, like Tony Clement says we want more resources, but the resources consist of RCMP helping carry baby carriages and stuff across the snowbank. So there's no turning them back. There's no real vigilant border guarding. It's assisting them in. Do we need to turn them back? Is that what the Conservatives are advocating here?
You know, I don't think we're advocating anything like that. We're advocating the fact is the safety and security of Canadians first always has to be there. And you know, when we look at people coming seeking asylum from the United States, how are they getting here? We've heard about people walking through 12 kilometers of blizzards, and we have to worry about that human side of things as well. So there's a whole bunch of things to look at this. But we also have to make sure that we're going by the laws of Canada. What is right and wrong? And, you know, I don't want to tackle the third country. I don't want to tackle that today, but I want to talk about the fact that making sure that the people, but the people coming to Canada, we need to make sure that we're having those proper security checks done as well. Because if one person sneaks in, then that's going to be horrifying for the rest of Canadians. There may not be any, but we do have to make sure that we're protecting. And, you know, there is a proper channel to go through. I've done many immigration cases over the years, and I understand it's, you know, it can be very difficult, but there are proper ways of going through this process.
Nikki, one of your colleagues, Ann Quash's riding is sort of the main corridor coming up from the states at Quebec. She says they need more resources, but I don't think she's talking law enforcement. I guess she's talking humanitarian resources. Is that what they need?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm from Manitoba. In fact, in a previous life, I had the opportunity to work with one of the organizations that is tasked with helping these newcomers. And look, the bottom line here is we need to repeal the Safe Third Country Agreement. People need to be able to claim refugee status lawfully, essentially, at the border, which is something that they can't do. And that's what's pushing them to cross the border in inhumane conditions, as was pointed out. I mean, the insinuation that somehow the RCMP need help. I mean, I've seen a video where the RCMP officer is desperate to help the person in this situation. They are doing their job. What's necessary here is to move this legislation that is frankly endangering people. And really, we need to just, match the words with action. I mean, we've heard from Prime Minister Trudeau this openness, this understanding that we need to welcome people. Well, this is what it looks like, repealing this agreement and ensuring that folks that are coming through our borders have the supports necessary and are able to go through a process that, yes, does exist in our, should and ought to exist for them as well in our country.
Yeah, I mean, okay, let's move along then. I am curious, though, because certainly Ralph Goodale seems to think that he wants to put something more into this issue, into this effort, because there's certainly a bit of a rush. But on the other hand, Brian Mulroney says we don't have to do anything because it's sort of a one-off. This is not going to escalate. What's your view on that? Are we seeing the leading edge of something, or are we seeing a sort of an anomaly that the media suddenly discovered and went, oh, great, this is a big story. We're seeing a lot of humanitarian, pretty photos of RCMP officers smiling and stuff. Are we being duped to find a problem that isn't there?
Well, there's no doubt there's a humanitarian component to it, and I would commend Nikki for her work on the ground on that. But I would also resist your viewers from the temptation to try and speculate about whether or not we're on the precipice of some new trend, which I alluded to earlier. So in the meantime, I think what is required is exactly what Minister Goodale said in the House earlier today. You need strong communication between the various branches of law enforcement and immigration, and if they require additional resources, then they will certainly present that case, and we should all have every confidence that in the meantime, Canadians will have their borders protected.
Last word to you on this one, Karen. Do we prepare for the worst and hope for the best on this?
I do agree with Marco on this. We have
We
have to be prepared, but at the same time, I don't see a flood. I just don't see it happening. That being right, I might be eating my words next week, but as of right now, I don't see this happening, but I think we have to be prepared in the fact that we need to make sure the resources are there for immigration services. We recognize that people are coming with probably no clothes, no food, no shelter. Mm-hmm. So humanitarian needs there, but we also have to make sure it's the right people coming to Canada, and so that's why paramount is Canadian safety.
All right, we're out of time. Thanks very much. You're on a break week next week. Yeah, I know you work harder in your ridings than you do here.
Absolutely, door to door.
Anyway, so we'll see you in a couple of weeks. All right, thanks for coming in. We'll see you then.